you very much for agreeing to do the interview. I appreciated it, and thank you for your time. The people in the bioscience boardroom will get a lot out of your expertise, and I'm glad that you're willing to share that with them. Your background, clinical development, right along the whole concept to commercialization path, it's a great story. Would you be able to start maybe with some introduction and background about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So Dan Carlin, I'm a physician. I'm triple boarded in psychiatry, addiction medicine, and clinical informatics. And actually started informatics before medical school. So I worked in cognition in medicine and in some core sort of clinical informatics domains as a master's after college, and then went to medical school. So it gave me a really interesting take on medical education and the process of becoming a doctor, because I'd already spent time studying the process of becoming a doctor and how we teach medicine and how we teach medical decision making, medical logic, and you know the trouble is that we often don't do that right. I don't know, right word, but the way that we teach medical decision making and the way that we practice and rehearse medical decision making is not the same logical process that's used by physicians in practice. So there's this sort of forward chaining logic that's done in grand rounds and in settings where medical education is happening, where you sort of get one symptom and you list all the whole differential, and then you get more symptoms and you narrow the differential. And the reality is that's just not how anyone thinks in practice. In practice, it works a very different way. It's a more of an inductive backwards chaining logic where there's no immediate assumption, and then within a few minutes of data, a few seconds really of data collection, there's sort of a leading theory, and then the best doctors do things to try to disprove their theory, right? You ask the questions that are most likely to make you wrong. A lot of the times where there are medical errors, it's because once that theory is planted, someone doesn't have a whole lot of time, and they go, okay, well, we'll just chase this. And they ask questions that are more confirmatory rather than attempting to falsify their own theory. So I spent 8 years, 4 years of medical school and 4 years in residency, practicing something that, that I consciously knew wasn't the way we really think. And so you sort of do this thing where you practice one way and act another. And so some of the things I've had the opportunity to do or contribute to medical education and resident education, and kept doing that even after I went to Pfizer. So my first job out of residency was as a physician IT liaison at Tufts Medical Center, which was like the head doctor for inpatient informatics at the medical center. And right around the time I started that job, Pfizer had Peter Bergathon, who's now at Biogen and was at Pfizer at the time, was trying to. He had just started at Pfizer less than a year earlier and had this idea of starting a fellowship where young faculty in psychiatry and neurology could be part of the neuroscience research unit on a part-time basis. And so he and I met as he was building this out, and I ended up being the first fellow in that program.
Wow.
I was doing about half-time informatics, half-time neuroscience. And at that time, we were supposed to be more of a sort of an early science, target discovery, really discovery-oriented computational neuromedicine group. And over time, that group became much more interested in clinical measurement. The acuity of the need was higher, right? So in neuroscience and psychiatry and neurology, you have this development process where you have a target, you have expected effects, you do some animal model, right? You do all the discovery stuff, you progress the compound to the clinic if it's safe enough, and if it looks like it probably will work. And what was happening was that these compounds were showing up sort of for FIH studies, and folks weren't really sure what to do with that. Of course, you put them in healthies first, you get your safety signals, but there's a ton of pressure to demonstrate evidence of efficacy earlier in the process, right? So yeah. Especially systemic drugs that are safe enough to be systemic drugs for non-fatal illnesses are often so safe when they get to phase one that they're not going to fail in phase one. And so you come out of phase one knowing they're safe, but not knowing much else. So the pressure is, can you demonstrate efficacy? So a lot of what we started doing was figuring out how do we pick the right patients when we're able to, or how do we pick the right people when we're able to go into people? And then what do we look for to start to try to understand if maybe this drug works? And so we did everything from high dimensional EEG to fMRI work, and ultimately did quite a bit of I'd say more behavioral work and high granularity behavioral work, which obviously led to, and at some point in all here, I got hired out of my academic job and fully into Pfizer, not fully into Pfizer. I always kept a 10% effort at the medical center. I was associate training director there still, and kept a practice going, and actually opened a network of addiction clinics in the Boston area called Column Health while I was doing all this. But what we became was a measurement group, and really a behavioral measurement group, and obviously digital and mobile, cell phones, watches, and these sorts of things. While they'd been around for a while before this, and had actually been included in quite a few clinical trials, this sort of idea was like, throw a Fitbit in it and see what we see. We tried to take a much more fine-grained look at this and figure out, is there a way to use digital devices, mobile devices, to actually measure the effects of drugs in a better way, and a better way maybe being more precise, more sensitive, more continuous, higher granularity, better temper, whatever, right? Across the board, there are ways to improve measures. And so out of that, a couple of projects grew, but ultimately our division became digital medicine. And by the time Pfizer pulled its neuroscience portfolio, essentially, we had already diversified beyond neuroscience, and we're working across the portfolio on other research units as well. And so I did that until August. I had to look at the calendar. It was August. I left the clinics, left Pfizer, left Boston, moved to New York, and had 0 jobs for like a week before I got a little panicky, and then I got way too many jobs. But primarily what I'm working on. So I do some clinical work. I just got credentialed up in Montefiore here in the Bronx. And so I've been doing a little bit of teaching and a little bit of clinical work, and I'm consulting on some other clinical development projects. But really what I'm doing primarily is something like what we were doing in digital medicine, except with a startup called Health Mode. And so I'm the CEO of this company, Health Mode, which is funded by DCVC, California Venture Capital Fund. And we are trying to do exactly that. We're trying to use digital to build measures that are easy to use, that often latent, and that will make it possible to replace existing clinical measures with something that can run on a subject's or a participant's cell phone, or that uses an Apple Watch, or that uses sort of, the goal is to go as latent as possible, right? So can you get latent data capture just from a phone in the pocket? Can you, with very low friction, replicate, duplicate, or improve an existing clinical measure using latent technology, latent data? And so that's the goal. And ultimately, this sort of pushes real world data and clinical trials data in the same direction, right? We've had real trouble translating a lot of talk about real world data. One of the companies I'm helping is a company concerned with patient ownership of their data, rather than sort of rights and privacy, really pushing for laws and technology that enables ownership, which is a step further than privacy regulations. But
can you elaborate on that one a little bit?
What's that?
Can you elaborate on that one a little bit?
It's a company called Humanity.co, hu-manity.co, and fundamentally it's a titling system for medical data that allows for people to opt into a system using the app that essentially they claim ownership of their data. They say here are the conditions under which I believe it can be used, and they're pretty granular. You can